I'll be honest, despite being a creator myself, I don't watch a ton of furry YouTube. But when I do, the videos I tend to stick to are convention vlogs. They are some of my favorites to watch and also some of my favorites to make, as they allow viewers to live vicariously through the camera and enjoy some of the highlights of all the wonderful furry conventions across the world. But some of the most common comments I see on those videos and indeed on mine are how some furries are able to go to so many conventions. And that's a fair question, as we all know furry conventions aren't always the cheapest way to spend an extended weekend, and that's assuming that you could get the time off for it in the first place. And even then, if you travel to a lot of them, those costs can really add up. I was actually just looking at my expenses for the last year while working on my taxes, and after rent, food, and my car, the largest category that I spent money on last year was traveling to cons. So that begs the question, how are members of this fandom doing it? Well, even despite what social media might show us, everyone's situation is different, and there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that get members of this fandom to cons, some that are a lot more involved than others. Let me explain. For many furries, furry conventions are a big deal. For some, it's one of the few times in the year where they can let their guard down and be their true selves. For others, it's the only time that they get to see their best friends in real time, in person, instead of just online. And for many, it's also a chance to show off their talents at things like dancing, DJing, and other ways that they express themselves. And that's just scratching the surface. The main point here is that furry conventions mean a lot to people in this fandom. I mean, look at me. I feel like every other video I post here is about cons in some way. But if you like hearing about my musings about cons, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss them when they come out. But because they mean so much to so many people, many furries will try to go to one at least once a year, and many end up going to many of them throughout the year as well. And what tends to happen is these furries that go to these cons share their highlights on social media, and a lot of the responses end up asking how they could get to all of these cons all over the place. Or more specifically, how could they afford to go to all of these cons? Now, if you're familiar with my videos, you know that I've gone over the cost of going to cons and they can add up pretty quickly. These experiences are investments, not just from a monetary standpoint, but from a time standpoint as well. Especially here in the United States, there's only so many days that we can take off away from work, and choosing those dates to match up with cons isn't guaranteed either. So with all of that being said, how do so many furries make it to so many cons? Well, from what I've seen, the serial con-goers can be organized into four main categories of how they make these cons happen. The first one is the simplest. They could just simply afford to do so. Many furries in this fandom are privileged enough to have good jobs with flexible benefits that allow them to afford the travel and the time off to go to a bunch of cons throughout the year. And if furry is your biggest hobby outside of work, most of your disposable income might end up going to the fandom, to the point where your actual job becomes the main funding source for your main hobby. And honestly, that's the long and short of it. And I know many furries that are working their tails off in school and outside their other jobs to put themselves in the best position to be able to have a job that gives them that amount of flexibility, because furry means that much to them. But at the end of the day, some people just got it like that, especially in this fandom. The second category that I've seen is almost antithetical to the first, where some furs are very thrifty when it comes to getting to cons. As expensive as they might be if you pay the full price for everything, there are actually a lot of ways that you can save quite a bit of money when going to conventions. Many furries may go to many cons, but stick to the ones that they are close to so they can either drive or take the train to them instead of paying for flights, which even short ones can be really expensive. Once they're there, a classic way that I'm sure everyone who's gone to cons has done is split rooms. Now, I'm not going to leak how many people I've seen packed into one room before, but the more you add to a room, the less you have to pay for your share. And this mentality goes for even all the other things that surround cons. They may go grocery shopping and make simple but effective meals so they don't have to eat out. They may limit their budget at the dealer's den and the artist alley and actually stick to it. Or even do little jobs for their friends, like be their photographer or videographer, in exchange for meals or nights at the con rooms. The point is, when you start to break up some of the more expensive parts of a con and be smart about how you spend, you can easily turn a weekend that would have otherwise cost thousands of dollars into one that costs barely over $100. The third group of people that make going to a lot of cons work are volunteers. Those who volunteer or staff cons basically trade their time and helping out at the con for some of their costs of attending. Depending on the con, you could really reduce your overall spending if you volunteer to help out. Most cons will help compensate you with discounted or free registration, give you better choices when it comes to accommodation, and even take care of your meals for you while you're working. It's the way that many people in this fandom go to cons exclusively, and one of the ways that furs spread their con budgets across multiple different ones as well. And sure, it might be volunteer work that cons desperately need more of, but you do get something for your time and effort that does help keep the cost of cons a bit more manageable. And finally, the last group of people that get caught up in the discourse of being able to go to all these cons all the time are people that actually don't do that. This is a little bit of a weird way to think about it, but for a vast majority of con-goers in this fandom, most of them actually only make it to 1 or 2 cons a year. The thing is, different batches of people choose 1 or 2 cons at different times, so when they are all sharing their experiences at one con, they get caught up in the group of those who actually do go to a lot of cons and get asked the same question: how do you do it? In reality, whether it be time, the costs, or simply having other things to do with their lives, most people in this fandom go to a few cons every year, not one every other month. I don't want to make the impression that everyone is always going to cons and make people feel bad when they can't. Trust me, you're in good company. Now, that being said, I do still encourage everyone to try to go to a con as often as they comfortably can, even if it's just once a year. And I do mean comfortably, because being able to go to a con is still a privilege and a luxury in many respects. And even though I highly discourage this, there are many furries where cons are so special to them that they actually go into debt to attend one. But I really do want to emphasize that you do not have to do that. We all have seen the growth in this fandom lately, and I think I'm comfortable betting on the idea that furry conventions are not going anywhere anytime soon. If that experience is a stretch for you financially, I suggest saving up for one as best as you can. And these savings goals don't have to be anything complicated either. You can estimate the costs for a con, put a little bit away whenever you can, and eventually you might have enough saved to attend a con one day. Again, the cost of cons may seem intimidating at first, but there are so many ways that you could get those costs down to help get you there. You could even employ some more advanced financial tools to help out as well. I know for me, I use the point system for my credit cards to help cut down the cost of things like flights when I travel to cons. It takes a little bit of math to figure out, but it can lead to some huge savings in the long run. The bottom line is, the main goal of this video was to try and disprove the notion that everyone in this fandom is rich. Along with that, there are a lot fewer people going to cons than you might think, and even those who are going a lot less frequently than it might seem. So don't feel too bad if you haven't gone to a con yet. I'd rather you wait until you can do so without caring about what it does to you financially than have to figure that out after the fact. And if you're willing to do a little research and ask around, the overall costs of con can actually be a lot lower than you might think. But there's no reason to try and keep up with those who seem to be going to cons all of the time. Waiting until you can do so without worrying about the costs will make them a lot more enjoyable overall. Alright, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the next one, but until then, stay wild out there. Peace.